Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the launch of 9 Letters by John Webb. My name is Jennifer Malik, and I'm the editor of the reading list. Thanks to Penguin Random House South Africa for co-hosting this event with us. John will be joined in conversation this evening or this afternoon with Nancy Richards, who's on my left or right, depending on whether you're watching on the screen or if you're sitting next to me. Nancy is an independent journalist with a good few years experience on radio and in print, and I'm sure you're all familiar with her voice, if not her face, but you'll soon hear that and you'll be able to place it. As a radio presenter, she's hosted shows on literature, the environment, women's issues. In print, she covers the environment, books and literature, lifestyle, travel, and decor, among many other subjects. She's the founder of a nonprofit organization called Women's Zone, and the Women's Library, which are based at the Artscapes Theatre Centre in Cape Town. Nancy is also the author of the books Beautiful Homes, as featured in Fair Lady magazine, the co-author of Women Today, 50 Years of South African Women on Radio, and Being a Woman in Cape Town, Telling Your Story. She's a speaker, media trainer, and is a board member of the nonprofit organization Soil for Life, which sounds very interesting. She was born in London in the UK and is now based in Cape Town, is joining us from Cape Town, from a cold Cape Town, I think, this afternoon.
It's warming up, actually.
Oh, right. Well, it's a cold Joburg where I am, so we've obviously got your cold. John Webb, the author, who's sitting in the middle, was born and raised in Zululand, I believe, and qualified as an attorney in 1995. His work as a lawyer has taken him to many countries in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. John has written for GQ and Esquire magazine and has been shortlisted for the Mondi Magazine Journalist of the Year award in the Essays and Fiction category. His debut novel, Lotto, which was published in 2018, tells the story of Beryl Manier, or Mania, who is a wife and a mother of 2 daughters, and she wins the biggest lotto payout in history. And yeah, it's a sort of vaguely dystopian novel that sort of follows that story. His second novel, which we're launching tonight, is 9 Letters, and it's an uplifting novel that celebrates the power of letter writing. John lives in Honolulu and is joining us from Laos this evening. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
9 Letters is launched as an ebook. And it's available now wherever you get your ebooks, Amazon, Snaplify, Kobo, all over the place. So if you haven't got yourself a copy yet, go out and do that now while you're listening. The print version will follow in October 2020. So while you're waiting to hold the beautiful book in your hands, you can buy the ebook and read it while you're waiting. Please leave your comments or questions for John in the comment section on Facebook or on YouTube. I'll come back towards the end of the session and we'll have a Q&A and I'll pass your questions on to John. So if there's anything you want to ask him about publishing or about his book or about writing or anything like that, let us know and I'll pass those on at the end. And now I'm going to hand over to Nancy and enjoy the launch.
Thank you. Thanks, Jennifer. Lovely. Looking forward to it. And I'm the lucky one who gets to ask the questions first. And have I got lots of questions for you, John? So really, thank you very much for your time. It's exciting principally because you're in Laos, which I'm thinking, I don't think I've ever spoken to anybody there. Prior to which you lived in Honolulu, you lived in the States, you traveled all over Africa. And, you know, as you're sitting there, you could really be anywhere. So just give us a bit of a sketch of how it is in Laos at the moment.
Thanks, Nancy. Laos has been, I lived in Laos for 6 years before, and it's for me one of the most wonderful countries. It's a very discreet place. It's not a place that many people know about. It's landlocked. It's not a great world power, but it has a long and quite eloquent history. And I'm enormously impressed by the functionality of the culture and the way it works with very little in the way of any kind of institutional intervention. And it's reliant on traditions that are very, very old. It's not an urbanized country by any means. It's not an industrialized country. And all of these things draw me to it. As far as the experience of Laos during the pandemic is concerned, I can't think of a better place to be than Laos. We've fortunately, for whatever quirky reason, we have a very small number of coronavirus cases that have been detected. I think only 19 cases have been found. We've had a bit of a lockdown as a precaution. There was a moment during the New Year celebration in April, which happened in April here, where you were like all my South African compatriots, we couldn't buy alcohol. But aside from that, the lockdown has now been eased. The difficulty and the challenge is simply that we're not connecting globally in trade and tourism and all of those other things with the rest of the world. So that's a challenge for the country. But it's certainly been very peaceful and quite disciplined and a lovely place to be.
It just sounds such a very different experience, as I think of it. I think there it is in the East, so it's, I think, very ancient, I think very traditional, I think very Buddhist, I think very different from Zululand, where you grew up. Do you feel like a square peg in a round hole, or are the edges beginning to come off?
I'm glad you mentioned Zululand. It is the most. It is the country that resembles Zululand the most for me, probably outside of Africa. I have lived in Thailand and Cambodia and Burma, and Laos is just. I keep driving around and thinking it's exactly what life was like when I was growing up. So, you'll drive down the road. There will be a stall. Somebody's selling pumpkins and so on, chickens strutting about, just communal life happening on full display. It's quite authentic experience.
So, wherever one is in the world and whatever your surroundings and environs are, necessarily, I would imagine, they would have some sort of impact on your writing. I mean, let's be honest, you're a lawyer, so you're a legal man. And I don't know what environmental impact, one has on a sort of a legal mind, but certainly on a writing mind, I would imagine that you would absorb a lot of your surroundings. Having said that, 9 Letters is actually set in South Africa. But just before we get onto the book, to what extent do you closet yourself away when you're writing and not think about your environment? Or does it impact in any way on the way you think and on the way you write?
Well, I think your environment does influence you wherever you are in the world, and I think that then again, the process of writing is as you correctly say, I think it's necessarily a very solitary experience. It is something where you tend to shut yourself off from external influences, and whether you're in Laos or in America or in Nigeria or wherever. So, but all of these things have a way of forming a kind of presence in your mind. And I'm always convinced that the things you remember are the things that you really ought to remember. I'm never particularly worried about forgetting things. I'm always so you should have. And that is important for me in the process of writing, because it's extraordinary to me how the most nebulous thing that I might have encountered, whether in an exotic location or not, suddenly finds a place on the page. So in writing Lotto, for example, I remember I have an image of my grandmother, and she was sitting in a chair in the sunlight on her back, and that was all it was. But I that stuck with me and found a place in Lotto.
Yeah, the subconscious works in strange ways, doesn't it? So I'm interested in not just in the way that you write or the impact of other things, the influence of other things on your writing, but also on your thinking, because again, in 9 letters, you reflect a great deal of thought process, which we'll get to through the 9 letters. There are a lot of things that you've done a lot of reflecting on. And as a traveler, I imagine one picks up all sorts of things that if you just stay in one place, you've got a certain amount of ideas around you. But as a traveler, it gives you an opportunity to think globally. I mean, I hesitate to say out of the box because it's a bit corny, but to think about things beyond your immediate moi, as it were. Is that how your thinking has grown?
It's a great question, because in fact, it's referred to in 9 letters, and it's a point made, and I've discussed it with a lot of South Africans over the years. And it's a point that's made in a book where Teddy, the protagonist, who's a South African, his family is of European heritage. He's 6th generation South African. But he, as you might have noted, he recalls that right at the end of the novel that he's essentially lived, and so have all his ancestors, as expats in Africa. And it's that particular idea struck me when I began to travel into other African countries. And I traveled to Congo, Brazzaville. I spent a lot of time there. I lived in Nigeria for 7 months. I traveled to Angola and Uganda, Tanzania, and other parts of Africa. And I realized that there was this kind of mundane quality to life in those parts of the world that I didn't expect. And I expected them to be full of resentment or instability or kind of dramatic scenes of conflict or something like that, displays of poverty and so on. And it wasn't. There was this extraordinary kind of mundane quality to daily life. And I suddenly realized then how poorly I really understood it. And having grown up in South Africa in the 1970s, I had a very different understanding of what the rest of Africa was supposed to be. So that was a very important revelation to me, and it made me really question who I was in the context of South African life and the South African story. And so that's reflected in Teddy's realization that he had lived all of his life really as an expat. And that came back to me again living in Asia, where I really was officially an expat. And you kind of hang around expat restaurants, expat bars, and you go to the expat quiz night or whatever. Yeah. And and you kind of you recognize that characterizes a large part of South African life, or white South African life.
Let's dive into the book itself, and let's start with Teddy, because there are a number of stories going on in the book. There's a sort of family, the generational thing of different families, not least Teddy's own family. There are the 9 letters and the recipients, the letter writers, those 8 of them. And there's the Smollen versus Smollen case, which is where your legal savoir really comes into play. And I'm, sort of shake my head in horror at what goes on in the legal profession. But we'll get onto that later too. But linking all this together is our Teddy, Teddy Dickerson. Just give us a bit of a character sketch of Teddy. I mean, he's a lawyer, he's gay, it's there in South Africa. Tell us about Teddy.
Well, Teddy's fed up. I think he's middle aged. I think there's a point in the novel he turns 45 that he described as halfway to 90, and he's struggled to form relationships, friendships, even collegial relationships, and And he's the last one left of his family. So, you know, aunts and uncles and so on have either died or immigrated, and the only surviving link he had was obviously with his Aunt Val, and the story begins there when Val passes away. So now he really has to, and the symbolism of that is that he has to work out who he is. He can't rely on family or some other kind of social construct to determine or to define him. So he's rather confronted by that. And he takes comfort in his profession, but he realizes quite quickly into the book, as the Smolin case progresses, that this is no answer either. This is a bit of an artificial kind of construct as well. So he has this opportunity, and that's Val's legacy. He has this opportunity to correspond with these strange people around the world. And the important thing about it, and the reason why I called it 9 letters, is that it's a particular kind of communication, a particular kind of interaction, and it's the written word, which I think is a very different way of communicating.
Yeah, I'm just going to digress. Yes, I'm just going to digress right now before it goes off the agenda, because the thing about the written word and the thing about letters, and I referred to you being in this exotic place, and it would have been wonderful to receive a letter from you with a stamp. It would have just been very exciting. And those days are kind of over, because here we are, we've no more need for that sort of thing. But one of the things you say, I can't remember if you say it in the book or if it's somewhere that I read that you said, that the thing about writing, not just a letter, but any sort of writing, is the quietness of it, is the reflectiveness of it, is the contact between you and the paper, all of which it feels like something that you experience. I've no doubt that you write on a laptop like everybody else, but I think that's so important, and that's something that we're in danger of losing. So 2 questions here. One is, just explain a little bit more about that process of actual writing. And the second part of the question, cheekily, is, do you write letters? Do you physically write letters to people?
It's a very cheeky second question, I have to say, but of course I don't. But I have in the past, to answer your second question, and I was a very keen letter writer. But yeah, I've submitted to the new technology just as everyone else has, but I regret it and I'm sad about it. There are a number of aspects of letter writing that I think of writing in general that are very important, and I personally find writing to be a very therapeutic thing to do. Teddy remarks towards the end of the novel that you're bound to be a little bit more careful about what you say when you write, and I think that's quite true. You're creating a record, and it has some kind of durability that the spoken word doesn't have. And there's this, especially the written word with a pen on a piece of paper, because you can't just delete it. If you get to the end of the page and you make a message, you've got to start again. Unless you want to cross it out or your letter looks messy, but otherwise you've got to rewrite the whole page.
Yeah.
And that makes you quite attentive to what is it that I'm saying. And I think that if you take writing seriously, you will find that it has a therapeutic effect. And not only that, I think you start to understand something about what it is, what is it that you understand of yourself, and what is it that you think you have to say. And you find that you don't have much, and it becomes not so much a question of what do you write, but what do you dare to write? What do you dare to put down on a piece of paper that might outlive you? What in a fluid and changing world, and where our perceptions are fluid and changing along with it, what might withstand all that fluidity? What might be valid?
Mm.
And so
Well, yeah. No, I was going to say that's a perfect point to come in to 9 Letters the book, because that's exactly what happens. Aunt Val, who is a woman of paradoxes and contradictions, and she has a wonderful line where she says, well, it doesn't matter if I'm wrong or right, I'm always right, or something like that. She's rather unlovable. She's the unlikable Aunt Val, but her legacy is these letters, and without giving anything away, when she passes away, or just prior to passing away, she gives poor old Teddy, she gives him these letters and says, please go and post them, which he does. And you have chosen these recipients of the letters with whom she's been corresponding, and they live in India, they live in Egypt, they live in Cambodia, Australia, England, Zimbabwe, Harare, and you can't understand why she doesn't call it Rhodesia, or at least whatever it is, Rhodesia, not Zimbabwe, Salisbury, that's right. And I thought to myself, you've chosen these people. How I almost wanted to Google them to find out who they were. So who were these recipients of letters? And did you have an idea about what the essence of those people were that you wanted to put across? I mean, were they sort of like vehicles for your thought processes? Who are they, simply put?
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, they are vehicles for my thought processes, but they also deliberately had to be very diverse. And Val was a very opinionated woman. She didn't encourage people, she exhorted people. And so it was, and she had a very sort of very conservative view of the way the world is and the way the world should be, and the way people should behave, and so on. So it was very important that they were all from diverse backgrounds, because that does tend to contradict the way she actually saw the world. But she was, in fact, quite capable of engaging with people that really behaved very differently. So there's one character, Candace, who's an American and who uses American language. Bell, is maintained a very happy correspondence with her. And Teddy was really surprised to discover this. He said, Bell often used to complain about American English, because she used to complain about something called Americanizationalism. And Darshini in India, her mother was white, her father was Indian. And this was something that would have been disconcerting to Bell. And so Teddy was kind of wondering, well, how did she maintain really such an affectionate rapport with Darshini, who was so accepting of that kind of arrangement. So she had this secret sort of life where she could tolerate diversity in a way that people who knew her just couldn't believe possible. So that was essentially how the characters were lined up. They had to come from different places.
So you were looking for, in choosing them, and interesting that they're all women. In choosing them, did you choose them for their geographical location or for their opinions? Because I mean, one from Caroline, poor Caroline, who lives in the UK, who you describe her as having conventional morality, which actually appalls poor Teddy. So they've all got their own little bit of essence. Did you choose their location according to their essence? How did you grow each one of them? Did you have a little post-it and say, okay, Darshini's going to be this, Nawal is going to be that? How did they develop?
I don't know how I chose the locations, actually. I think for some reason or another, I think each place spoke to me in a way, and suggested that perhaps that political or cultural setting, this might produce a person like this. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned that they're all women, and I was thinking about that too, and that wasn't deliberate either, because I'm quite sure Val could easily maintain some correspondence with the man as well. She didn't. So I think that sometimes there are just these impulses that are going on, and these ideas are popping up. I mentioned to you earlier, I mean, I write very, very quickly. And I write typically with, so I write quickly, but I will ponder an issue for years. And then I'll have an opening line, and I'll have a sense of an ending. And basically, once I've got those two things, then I start writing. And I have very little idea what happens in the middle. And so it's all a lot of it is quite mysterious to me. Yeah. In 9 Letters, for example, I had really pondered the nature of truth. And I wanted to sort of understand what it was. Why do we seek it? We all celebrate it, and we all are proud of ourselves for telling the truth. We all demand the truth. What's the attraction? And so that was kind of the question that I'd been fiddling around with in my mind, probably had it 20 years.
Well, I'd like to come back. No, carry on.
No, and then from there, I have a sense of an opening line and a sense of an ending, and that I might pay tribute to my mother, if I may, because we were having a conversation years ago on the phone. She told me that she maintains a correspondence with quite a few people around the world, letter writing, and people that she's never met. And I was really surprised by that. And I thought, well, I mean, and some of these, exchanges have been going on for decades. So that was the real genesis of this particular book. And then I thought, I'm going to take my curiosity about the nature of truth, and I'm going to see if something like that kind of experience can explain something to me. and so that's how the book came about.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful, because I was actually at some point going to say to you, because of the sort of multi-layered nature of the book, I was wondering what the trigger point had actually been, but now you've answered it. So it was your mother and her multiple correspondence. But in her letters to all her correspondents across the globe, Val is sometimes a little economical with the truth, or at least she rather elaborates on the truth. And I can't remember who it is, but she tells somebody that Teddy is actually a high court judge, and tells somebody else that he's married with 6 children, which, he seems to sort of be a little bit surprised at, and it becomes difficult for him to correspond and not own up. So, but the truth is something that's very important to you. In fact, the opening quote of the book, you quote Andre Brink. The truth is not a set of facts which can be recounted. It's a landscape through which we travel in the dark. So is truth, as a legal person, is truth something that weighs heavily on you? The quest for truth, you as an individual, clearly for Teddy, I'm not sure, but what is truth? What is the quest for truth for you? Why is it so important?
Well, it does come from my work as a lawyer, and I was a disputes lawyer in the early part of my career, and I really found that there was just no real relief to be had in the whole process of litigation. Or if it was, it kind of faded away quite quickly. And it kind of annoyed me. And it just never felt that it was sufficient. The Brink quote was very interesting to me because it describes truth as being something that's really in motion. And that's quite a different understanding of what we understand truth to be in a court of law, where the truth is kind of static. You assemble facts and you arrange them in a particular order, and then hopefully they'll reveal something to you about a final state of affairs. And on that basis, you apportion liability this way or the other. And that's the end of the matter. It's resolved, finished. I mean, that's not a landscape that you're traveling through in the dark by any means. And it was revealed to me, really. I mean, I really wanted to find out what's missing here, and prompted me to write the book. And Teddy discovered, as did I, really, at the same time, that truth, and in fact, it's actually revealed in the first letter. So the first letter is Val's letter to Teddy, and she knew she was dying, and she wrote her final letter to him, and that we call in the book the ninth letter. And she says to Teddy, "Don't worry too much about the facts, Teddy. It's what you feel about the facts that's important." And that was a really interesting revelation to him. And she says, "I know you might argue with me and so on, and be clever, but that's really what I'm going to tell you, and that's my last word." And that, I think, is quite true, in that we have a fairly narrow understanding of truth in a legalistic sense. But we are emotional creatures, and we respond to the truth in an emotional way. And our emotions are in motion all the time. So you can perceive a set of facts, and you can interpret them this way today. You will interpret them a different way tomorrow. And so it's a bit frustrating to keep assembling these static pieces of data, and then realizing that we're all going to look at them differently down the line. So the truth, the idea of truth, is something that actually becomes personal. And how do you interpret facts in a way that is authentic? And how does the idea of truth guide you in the course of your life, philosophically? So that was kind of the issue I was interested in exploring. And I think what was interesting about all the letters is that they were full of lies. The people that wrote to Val were also lying there. He wasn't sure. He thought, was Wilma in Canada really so poorly treated by her lover, or was she a boring old frump? So he couldn't quite tell either. But what he did know, and what he did appreciate, was that they were all, not despite the facts, they were all able to comfort him and to care for each other's story. And so that's not what lawyers do.
No, absolutely not. And interesting about the letters, because Aunt Val, unlovable as she is, she urges Teddy to ensure that he tells each and every one of the letter writers, the recipients, that she loved them, which seems like, it's quite a burden for poor Teddy. But I just want to come back to the issue of truth and the legal profession, which are sort of uncomfortable bedfellows sometimes. I suppose I'm thinking of truth and justice, but truth gets hijacked sometimes in the legal profession. It's very much a matter of interpretation, and Teddy becomes quite disillusioned with the whole legal profession. I'm not going to sort of go too much into that, but what is that a common thing for people in the legal profession to think, this is just manipulation? How does your feeling about the legal profession and Teddy's feelings of ambivalence, how do they interact?
Well, I question a lot about the way law is practiced, and as I've grown older, I really propose that there are different ways of resolving conflict and disputes, and I would hope that we'll move as a society beyond this almost deferential reliance on this organized institutional dispute resolution framework that we've set up for ourselves. And that coincides almost entirely with what Teddy experiences as well. I mean, he says in one of his letters, I think he says to canvas. You know, I'm running a case and I just don't know whether we're going to be able to resolve it properly. And I feel like just telling everybody to run out and hug each other and sort it out. Just, you know. So it is about, and it goes to letter writing as well, and that whole idea of, you know, introspection and what is it that I have to say. It goes to understanding the nature of morality as being really something that's personal to you, and how your personal morality contributes to a kind of cultural morality. So you really move away from matters of law and a rules-based order, which is very static, designed to be very static, into something that's capable of accommodating a far more fluid and authentic kind of existence. You know, the philosopher Wilhelm von Humboldt, who, of course, we all read regularly, but he had a wonderful line: moral culture springs solely and immediately from the personal life of the soul. And I absolutely love that idea, because what he's talking about is culture on the one hand, which is a recognition of a kind of collective construct, and the soul, the individual. But not only the soul, but this kind of this mysterious part of the individual, this part that the self doesn't really even understand. And it's that part that contributes directly to a moral culture. And so when we rely heavily on, in fact, Humboldt goes on to say, it is not from artificial contrivances, which we might look at as the rule of law. So really, we owe it to ourselves to decide what is your own moral sense. We're very good in a rules-based society to point fingers and tell everybody, you know, what they should be doing, and we sue each other. We have court cases and we assemble all the facts, and they're valid for that particular day. And and we win and we lose. But it doesn't really have a place in our authentic experience of life, which is quite fluid and quite unstable and quite mysterious to us. And our perceptions are changing all the time.
Yeah. I just wanted to come in there because there are two other aspects that I'd just like to touch on. And one is the issue of being a lawyer on one side. I'm thinking left brain, right brain, being a lawyer, and also being a writer. Do you find that being a lawyer, or at least being a writer, is the sort of antidote that you maybe need from doing a legal job, which is very sort of cut and dried and black and white, and I imagine, you know, how do the two things work hand in hand? Do you find yourself separated mentally? Does writing give you
totally,
the?
It's totally, Nancy. It's totally separate, and I'm really just trying to redeem myself as a writer. So, I've never really been happy in the business of law, and I think I've loved writing since I was very young at school, and I've had an artistic appreciation for things, and I probably shouldn't have gone into it at all, but I have, and it's been instructive to me, and it's given me lots of insight. So I don't live with any regret, but I don't know if I was well suited to it, and there are people that are better suited to it than I am. But I'm more interested now, I think, as a kind of political creature or a philosophical creature, to take the insight that I've gained from nearly 3 decades of practicing as a lawyer, and share with folks who maybe see the law as the ultimate arbiter, as the ultimate form of relief. And say, you know, there's a philosophical possibility here that you might not be thinking about.
I'm just thinking about you getting some sort of balance in your life with the writing. But it seems also like you're making up for lost time, all those years that you've spent in the legal profession and continue to. You've been making up for lost time with the writing, because subsequent, not only did you write and self-publish Lotto in 2018, you've now published 9 letters, subsequent to which you've written another 3 books. And you confessed earlier that you wrote 9 letters in 29 days. So you're obviously prolific. And, you know, where do the ideas come from? And it's not quick to write a book. So once you've got the idea, do you just sit down and hit it? Is that how it works?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's probably because I've spent so many years not writing that I have all this material. So they're quick to write, but they've taken years to think about it, in a sense.
Yeah.
So and I write really to answer a question in my own mind. So this one was The Nature of Truth. The next one, which I hope will be published quite soon, at Teddy Dickerson. And that was, what is the nature of symbolism? Why do we have an attraction to symbolism? The one that's set in America is what is the nature of knowledge? And that's a fantastic issue. That's a terrific book that's being reviewed by a publisher in New York. So we hope that they'll all come out and you know, they'll add to a collection of stories.
So your books begin with a question, and hopefully or presumably they end with an answer, certainly for you and or the reader. But just going back to the issue of you having self-published in 2018 and the experience of working with a publisher, has it been a very different experience? What lessons did you learn along the way?
Well, it's been a completely different experience. And I learned a lot from the self-publishing process. You know, I did have the assistance of a fantastic editor in Australia, Kate O'Donnell, and she has edited all my books. But I didn't really take her advice on the first one, and I thought, no, I've got this. And it's a great book. It's a fun read, and I think people enjoy reading it. Having worked with Penguin, Random House, and the whole team there, it's just been fantastic, and they've been so incredibly professional and had such worked so hard and brought such great insight into what this book should really look like for the reading public. So I might just thank them all for really working with the whole team.
So you're open to suggestion. No, I was going to say, so you're open to suggestion once you've got your book, because I'm wondering the original book, has it changed very much in the process between trigger, concept and completion? Is it a different animal?
No, it's not a different animal. It's largely intact, but there've been tweaks here and there, a lot of tweaks. I mean, it's kind of hard to quantify, but it's largely what it was. But there was a structural problem in the very first draft, I recall. In the last few chapters, that was raised by the Penguin team, and I had to fix that. But aside from that, it's remained intact. But yeah, you know, good professional editing and proofreading and so on, and a sensitivity to the reading public, which I am not interested in particularly. But it is the job of a publisher to do that. Yeah. So I've learned a great deal, and a very different experience.
Yes, and you've clearly enjoyed writing it, because there's some wonderful sort of jolly phrases in it. I can't think of anything offhand, but I mean, it's very much the spoken word, and you know, Teddy sort of eye rolling at all the buddies that he works with. It's an extraordinary book with extraordinary emotions, and we haven't really even touched on the Smollen versus Smollen legal case, but that eventually becomes resolved, I suppose, if I can say that. So there are all sorts of resolutions, and certainly there's a resolution for poor old Teddy himself. I know that we have a couple of questions, so let's answer the questions. If you want to give us the questions, Jennifer, are you there?
Hello.
So,
yes.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Thanks for a really, really interesting discussion, guys. It was super, super interesting. I was sitting and listening and sipping my wine very happily.
Jennifer, it's early.
This is probably, oh yeah, this is probably one of the most cosmopolitan audiences we've had for a launch. I just want to show you some of the comments. You might recognize some of the names. John, you've got a good old school friend who's visiting. William George Lawrence.
Lovely to see you, William.
Megan says she can't wait to read it. Thinley says ready and waiting in Tanzania. Shakila says so exciting. And then
all the way from Uzbekistan. Nice to see you, Shakila.
Raymond
from the Philippines.
Step says hi from Quezon City. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right.
Philippines.
Brennan says hello from London. We've got
hi, Brennan.
Tom in Turin. Sak in Luang Prabang.
Luang Prabang, right around the corner.
And Kasana from Mokhale City.
And then
Alex from London.
Hi,
so that's very cool.
Great.
Very, very cool. Oh, and here's Craig, another author saying hello to another author. Hi, Craig, saying hello to you since I was 14. So that's really cool. We do have also, apart from all the comments, we've got a couple of questions. Let's see. Asunda says, did you have to readjust your writing style from lawyerese to fiction? Was it difficult to adjust?
That's a fantastic question, Asunda, because on the writing side, no. I've always loved writing, and I've loved writing fiction, and I've always found it a huge relief to be able to just let your thoughts go and kind of go a little bit mad, which you shouldn't do if you're writing anything in kind of legal document. But the reason why I think it's such a terrific question is it does compromise my enthusiasm for reading. Sometimes if I'm reading a novel, I switch into this way of reading it as a lawyer, and I really end up not enjoying it at all. And I'm constantly second guessing everything, questioning what the author is trying to say, and I stop enjoying literature. So on the reading side, it's hard to make that switch, but on the writing side, I'm all ready and more than willing to switch over to writing fiction.
Interesting. We've got an interesting question from Step, very wide-ranging question, or you can interpret it how you like, I guess. What part of the book do you like the most?
The beginning, the middle, and the end. Difficult to say. Yeah.
Did you? I suppose you can't have a favorite book yet, and authors never admit to having favorite books anyway. Maybe do you have a favorite character?
No, I don't want. I don't think I could ever do that. And I somebody asked me the other day, what is it was part of an interview, and it was what books would you not want to read during a lockdown? And I said no, I would never say that, because I appreciate everybody anybody who bothers to write anything down and tries to take the 26 letters of the alphabet and convey an idea. So I'm quite happy that people write, and I'm quite happy that I write, and I'm not willing to judge a character over any other.
Some of the authors I've seen chatting around social media, some have been saying they're not able to read during lockdown. Some have been saying they're able to read, but they're not able to write. Some have been saying it's been a great time to write, and they felt like just, the peace and quiet has allowed them to be quite productive. What have you found?
I haven't been able to write a thing. I write for The Mantle in New York. So go and have a look at their website as well, themantle.com. So I did write an article called Face Masks in the Age of Facebook. But that's the only thing I've written in the last so many months. So very difficult to write.
Can I just interject there, because you talk about not being able to write, but you've certainly been reading, and your answer to the question is, what have you been reading during lockdown? You've been rereading of Human Bondage by Somerset Maugham, and also Aldous Huxley's Perennial Philosophy. So you've been honing your philosophical brain, which is quite interesting. And just if I could also add, hello the world, all these people listening. When
I'll put more into the screen while you're talking.
Just quickly, John, when you're writing, do you even think about the audience that you're writing for? Do they need to be South African to understand Zululand? Are you just writing to, are you writing for whomever picks up the book?
I don't think about the reader or the audience, I'm sorry to say. And I've had a lot of advice. Other writers say this is what you should do, but I'm sorry to say I don't. It's a very solitary world, and I hope vainly that whoever does ultimately read the book, that they'll understand something of it. But aside from that, that's not my business. In a sense as well, there was that fantastic comment made by a Nobel laureate. It was on the BBC. They had a couple of physics laureates and literature laureates, so they were having a conversation. And the physicist said to the author, when you write a book and it's read by 100,000 people, well, you've effectively written 100,000 books. And I think that's true. And I kind of like that process, because then it's not really my responsibility, and it's up to the reader.
Dominique says, my favorite line, clean water for poor people, whatever will they think of next. It's lovely to have someone at a book launch who has already read the book. Doesn't happen often. Perhaps you could.
Dominique is a very good friend, and she did read one of the earlier drafts.
Oh, okay. So maybe you could talk a little bit about. Do you remember how this line came to you, or do you have a notebook that you keep?
Whatever will they think of next? So that was Caroline Beaufort, who's a very conventional, very kind of dull creature in a way. I think Teddy described her as she's the only kind of person who would do something unconventional if everyone else was doing. And she has a daughter who works for an NGO in Burma, and she's apparently helping poor people with a supply of clean water. Caroline finds this a bit of a wayward thing for her daughter to be doing. She's on the face of it, she's proud of her daughter, but you can hear the doubt. She says, so my daughter is, helping provide clean water for the poor. Whatever will they think of next? In other words, my daughter's a bit odd.
Cool, thank you. I'm just trying to look through, see which other questions we have. There's a sort of logistical question here that you might be able to answer. Raymond says, any special reason why you're launching the ebook 4 months before the actual printed book.
Raymond, thanks. That's a pandemic issue. So they were all going to happen one go. But I understand. I mean, I think the brick and mortar retail situation is a bit uncertain at the moment. So publishers, I think, are cautious to produce, large volume of printed books. So they just pushed that back to October.
And then a final question from Asunda again. 29 days to write a whole book. Wow. How did you write it? Can you talk about your process? Did you map out the plot beforehand and so on?
Asunda, thanks very much. I don't have a very detailed plan in my mind, but I like to have I think I always will write, and I'll be motivated to write once I've thought about an issue or a question for a very long time, and I've mulled it over in my mind, maybe for a few years. And then, as I mentioned to Nancy earlier, I'll have an opening line, I'll have an idea of a character, and then I must have a sense of where this where this whole story lands up, but I don't have a very good idea what happens in between. And that's all I have. And then I start writing, and it's quite an exploration for me. I don't know, and I don't plot and plan everything in great detail. I know there are writers that do that, and there are writers that don't. Kurt Vonnegut had a great way of describing this. There's two types of writers. There are bashers and swoopers. The bashers are people who plot and plan everything meticulously for years sometimes. James Joyce is a great example of that. And then you have swoopers, I'm a bit of a swooper. So it's just, you've got the idea, you've got the sense of what the story's about, and you just crash in and write until you stop. And Hemingway was a bit of a swooper. So I'm definitely of that class.
Can I ask a quick question? I just got two quick questions I wanted to know from Asunda, if she is busy writing herself or if she's a lawyer who's a writer, Mom K, if she's look forward to hearing more from Asunda. But I just want to ask you on the subject of the pandemic, John, somewhere in all your writing, you said the world is going to be very different. And in your view, it's going to be different for, the nature of progress is that it's not been good. And post the pandemic, things are going to be very different. And in your view, they're going to be better. But what sort of a strange place is it going to be for a writer? Because all the books that you've been thinking about in your head will all be kind of not irrelevant, but yesterday. They'll all be based on how it was, as opposed to, all these apocalyptic and dystopian books that are coming out. It'll now be the real thing. Do you think it's going to be a difficult place just for writers post the pandemic? If indeed there is a post-pandemic?
I'm not sure. I think the pandemic, I think a lot of the emotion that we're experiencing is tied up with, it actually has quite a long legacy or long history. So, people are examining the way we live our lives. How do we work? Where do we work? Why do we work? Do we go on holiday? Why do we do that? How much do we invest in that? How do we exploit resources? Those types of questions have just we've been forced to really confront those questions. We've had the time, a lot of people have had the time to confront those questions, and you haven't been able to pursue those usual pastimes during the lockdown. So you've had to think of other ways of living. So I think that, in a sense, a lot of the anxiety and a lot of the energy and the way this pandemic animates us is really because of things that have been of concern to us for a long time. It's just all been compressed into this space. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what will happen with the pandemic, but I think those issues will continue to be current, and they will continue. Books that were written before or after the pandemic that I think touch on our social values. I think they'll continue to be relevant in a post-pandemic world. I think the pandemic will be seen as a catalyst rather than...
Yeah, I mean, it's the job of a writer to, well, I'm thinking it's the job of a writer to paint the pictures for us, but the possibilities, you know, to sort of extend our minds. So it'll be interesting to see what books have been conceived post the pandemic, to see what pictures are possible, not least from you, we hope.
Yeah, well, thanks. And I have to say, with the next 3 coming up, I have actually thought of that, and I've wondered whether any of them are falling into, you know, into kind of redundancy. So I probably would have to revisit it as well. What's really changed up there?
Cool. We have a question. We have a comment here just to end off. I don't know if this is true. William says, another interesting fact about the author, speaks isiZulu very well. Is this the case?
He's very, very kind. I had a fairly decent grasp of it when I was growing up. But it's
okay, cool. I was going to say, being so far from home, you know, I was going to say maybe you wanted to send a message to your South African fans while you're so far from home and not really being able to visit for a while, probably.
Well, of course I do, and the book is set in South Africa because I'm in love with the South African story, and I would urge all my South African compatriots to be very proud and to be remind all my compatriots to be very proud of the story that has produced the country that you all live in today. It's a long and complex and beautiful story, and I hope that you will all find it in your hearts to play your best part in it. South Africa's story is by no means over, and I look forward to seeing how the people of the wonderful, wonderful country will write the next chapters.
It's a big story.
It's a big story.
Yeah.
Well, unless you have any final remarks or anything like that, anyone want to? Nancy, have you fulfilled your?
Well, yes. Just on the subject of language, I'm not sure what language they speak in Laos, but have you learned any of the local language? Because you know Mandela said that speak to a man in another language and you speak to his head, but if you speak in his own language, you speak to the heart. Are you able to speak to the heart of your fellow citizens there in Laos?
No, very, very, very sadly not, Nancy. I'm a bit deliberate about not knowing the language, but I rather like not knowing. And so the third book to follow, 9 Letters, is called Oblivion, and it's all about the value of not knowing things. And I think you'll have to read that to understand what I'm saying. But you know, I rather like the idea of walking down through a market and everybody's chatting away, and I have no idea what to say.
One thing you did tell us earlier, that apparently in Laos they don't shake hands the way they shake, and they always wear masks anyway. But the way they shake hands is to do this. So and as we know, it's a prayer. And also an emoji for thank you. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
you so much, both of you, for a wonderful conversation. I think, you know, those of us who are readers are really craving these kinds of events and conversations. So we really appreciate you taking the time to visit us at the reading list, and thanks to Penguin Random House South Africa for helping us organize. It's a really, really great way to spend an evening, you know. And thank you very much to Nancy for asking the questions, some very, very interesting questions. Thank you to John for writing the book and answering the questions. And the book is available as an ebook now, so you can get a copy from Amazon or Kobo or Snaplify or whichever platform you use. The hard copy will be out with its beautiful cover in October 2020. So while you wait for that to happen, you can get yourself a soft copy and read it while you wait. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and thanks for your questions. And you'll be able to watch this broadcast back again on Facebook and YouTube, where it'll stay for eternity.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye,
Jennifer. And thank you, Nancy.
Yes, and goodbye the world, all your buddies all over the world. Goodbye the world.
Good night.